5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, this is Who is Jon Ray with Nada Hogan. And I'll let her describe herself a little bit, but she was introduced to me in a very synchronous way, and I love when synchronicity brings people into my life. My aunt and uncle, who are some of the best seekers that I know and have put me on my own metaphysical and philosophical journey, met Nada through a couple of events that they frequent, and we'll talk a little bit about those. But Nada is a transformational life coach and an acupuncturist. And so for all of you tuning in, if you're having some frustration in your life, or if you feel like you need some healing, or if you feel like there's an obstacle in your life that is unsurmountable, we're here to open up your awareness to and give some case studies and examples of maybe how you might be able to reframe some of the issues in your life and grow your energy beyond them so that you can have success in whatever you're trying to do. And then hopefully we'll talk about kind of how to have a desire and grow your desire and 10x your desire and dream bigger than you ever thought possible to dream, and then deal with all of the garbage that's in between the way of where you're at now and where you want to go. So I guess let's start. Nada, describe your mood level.
Oh, my mood level. Well, I'm excited.
Awesome.
I'm thrilled to be here with you. It's a pleasure. I've known you for 10 minutes.
All right.
And it's fabulous. Yeah, so my mood level is wonderful. High vibration.
Awesome. And who are you?
Oh, so I am also a seeker. Yeah, I am. I work as an acupuncturist and a transformational life coach. And I am really just trying to figure out the meaning of life, what this is all about, and why we're here, and who we show up as. And who do we really want to show up as, because we have all these facades to fit in with everybody. And I'm just at the age now where I don't have enough facades and enough life events in my life that said, you know, you've just got to be you and do it how it feels right to you.
Yeah.
So, so I'm trying to understand this life on a level that just keeps opening up my awareness to the next level and the next level and the next level.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how kind of your transformational coaching work marries with your acupuncture work, because that's an interesting dynamic. And I think everybody is approaching transformational and catalytic work in their own way. So I'd love to hear about kind of how you landed on that modality and the way that you approach working with clients.
Well, the whole story is a little interesting because acupuncture was not really part of my plan. I was interested in it, but I didn't want to take the steps because it was 3 additional years of school, and I had no desire to go to school for 3 more years. So my daughter, 10 years ago, was killed in a car accident. And because of that, I needed something to do so I wouldn't go insane. Like I knew I was teetering between sanity and falling into the brink where you just don't come back. So I went to school for acupuncture. And while I was in school, I had, it wasn't psoriasis, it wasn't eczema, but something along those lines with my hands, which was really interesting because I'm an acupuncturist. I need to be able to feel, I need to feel energy, I need to be able to feel pulses, and I need to be able to feel my needles and what I'm doing, because we do a lot of techniques with needles. It's not just sticking them in. And I thought, how interesting is this? I'm getting ready to graduate and my hands are failing me. So we did everything Chinese medicine-wise with the best Chinese medical doctors from China, and we just couldn't cure it. We couldn't make it better at all. I went to an American acupuncturist, and she was the first person who ever said to me, so how old was I, 46, 47, 48, something like that? What do you think it is? And I said, one, I think I'm afraid to stand in my power because I'm going to be graduating, and now lives literally are in my hands with these needles, because you really can't hurt somebody if you don't know what you're doing. And people trust you. They want to feel better because of your work. And second, I said, I think it's because of my daughter. I'm still grieving my daughter. And now at this point, it had only been 4 years out. And in Chinese medicine, the lung channel is represented by the skin. So she made a formula. In Chinese medicine, we call it warming the uterus. So we use it for fertility. And I was like, this doesn't sound right. And she said, the shock to your uterus from losing your daughter, because in Chinese medicine, we call that the baby palace. The uterus is the baby palace. And yeah, isn't that cool? Mm-hmm. And the shock to the baby palace, and you're still cosmically connected to your daughter. And that's why this is showing up. And God's honest truth, within 1 week, after a year and a half of fighting this, in 1 week, my hands completely cleared up.
That's amazing.
Then we tweaked the formula. Messed up everything. But it was the first time I realized that we're this mind, body, spirit. So I already had a little bit of a taste of it with my daughter, just things that had happened. And so I just started realizing how things get blocked in the body. So when I was doing acupuncture, when people would come and say, I have chronic pain, I've done everything Western medical, there's nothing there, can you help me? Always it would come down to an emotional block. And as soon as you got to that emotional block, whatever that energy was, because energy is flowing to and through us all of the time, 24 hours a day, it never stops. If you can find that thing, then and needle then on the right channel, that goes away. But it's part of the mind, body, spirit all working together. It's not just, put the needles in and now poof, I'm all better. It's a mental. So that's how the coaching started coming into that, because people then would realize, oh my God, it's this thing that happened 25 years ago and now it's showing itself to me. So then we would coach through it. And people then were able to discover wonderful things about themselves and open up more awareness for them, new levels, and places in them that had been closed off for a long time, and life started shifting and changing. And how wonderful is that?
It's really awesome and interesting. And I want to dive into more about the mind, body, spirit connection, and then maybe how you would define soul in that scenario. Because I too, kind of landed on coaching work from that level of recognizing that there was all of this energetic garbage that was preventing me from moving forward in some of my bigger goals. And it was like I could either slowly burn that out of my system very slowly and gradually grow the courage to step into something, or I could find some kind of a modality that would expedite that process of clearing and flushing. And the way that I see it is almost like this roto-rooter, that you've got these clogged pipes, and part of the clog is at the soul level, part of this clog is at the spirit mind level, and part of the clog is at the physical level. And if you're trying to clear it from the physical level up, it's very difficult. But if you're trying to clear from the soul level down, it's much easier, because everything is being projected from that higher level downward. So I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of how you define those different levels, mind, body, spirit, and then where soul, if that's a term that you use, and if so, how would you define it?
Defining soul. Well, I hope I answer this for you. The way I see it is that we are spiritual beings having this physical experience, that everything that we do it's all soul. That we are just spirit, we are just soul, navigating this earth plane in this earth suit, if that makes any sense. And we just have to show up with 5 senses to be able to navigate what is here. But the essence of us, that knower, I don't know what else to call that, except it's sometimes I call it spirit, sometimes I call it soul. It is connected to that one consciousness, to the divine feminine, to God, to universal intelligence, whatever you want to call it. And that speaks to us, I believe that speaks to us, our soul, our spirit speaks to us through our body. So when we have that constriction, when somebody shows up in front of you and wants to ask you out on a date, and you immediately have this constriction, it's just like, I think that's just God saying that's a full body no. Like, right, whatever that energy is, this is not for you. Or a job, or whatever it happens to be. I think that is exactly what the body is doing. And there's actually been tests done on that, and it's all part of quantum physics, how the DNA literally will shrivel itself up in the face of things that don't feel well, feeling-wise, to the body.
Yeah.
So I think that the mind, And I qualify that the mind and the brain are not the same thing. The brain is just the switching station. Mm-hmm. And the mind is the part that is more connected with the energy that is flowing in. And then the body is the feeling part, if that's making sense. And they just work in conjunction with one another. So it's that thing where you don't have to know what is going on or what the situation is outside of this building. It's just, something just doesn't feel right to me. That gut, something is, and I think that's the mind, body, spirit working all together. Spirit's saying, not good. Body is responding with that feeling. And then the mind is the thing that helps us to discern, with reason, do we want to go forth with this or do we not want to go forth with that?
Yeah.
So that's how I put those three together.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think that I like the way that you described it, and I might take it a step further because I do think that our body and our DNA and all of that sensory input is giving us signals, and that our soul or higher self or spirit or whatever metaphorical term you want to give that guidance is communicating to us. But I think that guidance is about a present moment thing. So if I'm not in the place to properly interact with someone in a synchronous manner, then I'm going to shrivel up. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I can't interact with that. It just means that in my current vibration, it wouldn't be a good idea to do that. And so I'd be interested to hear, because a lot of people that I work with as a coach and that I see, looking to achieve something, they are having that kind of shriveling experience to something that they want to do. And so they're trying to figure out, how do I move beyond that and actually find alignment with something? So I'd be curious to hear how you define alignment and how that shriveling kind of, you said your knower, I like that word.
Yeah. When
you know something in your knower, how is that different from when you're afraid of something that you could clear?
Well, I think if there's something that we're afraid of and it's something that we're moving into that grows us, that is just pushing up against the boundaries of the reality that we've known. And so that's fearful because we don't know what's on the other side of that. But if it resonates with us, if it's in alignment with us, it feels good. So are you familiar with heart math? The
Yes.
Heart Math Institute. So a lot of times I'll just teach people to do that, where you
So let's explain it for somebody who may not know. So my understanding of heart math, and you can add to it, is that at Stanford University, there's a series of scientists and technicians who are basically learning about the electromagnetic frequencies that our heart sends out. So our heart is this power plant that's in the center of our chest. And as it beats, just like with any power source, it creates an electromagnetic frequency. And when we are in what heart math calls coherence, that frequency wave is a very fluid wave, and easily meshes with other frequencies. But when we are out of coherence, meaning we're in fear or danger, or you can just feel sometimes that nervous energy, that's being out of coherence. And so when we're out of coherence, it's this very jagged frequency, and it directly affects how our mind processes information. Can you add to that a little bit?
Well, yeah, and they as in the scientists know that there's a two-way communication between the heart and the brain. Mm-hmm. So the heart speaks to the brain and the brain speaks to the heart. But that pathway is stronger from the heart to the brain. Mm. And the heart literally has 40,000 thinking neurons. They call it the little brain. Mm. So when the heart knows something, you might still have that feeling, that fear, because it's new, it's challenging you, which is good. You don't want to stay static. Nothing in this world stays static. Everything is changing and moving. It's either you're growing or you're disintegrating.
Yeah.
So that feeling of I'm nervous, I'm scared, it's good. It's just pressing up against the boundaries of the reality that you've known. That's all that is. But that other part where it feels like, oh my God, it's like that visceral no. I mean, there's been many times where I have not listened to that and got myself into a bind and the whole time I knew, my gut knew, on a physical level, I knew this was not the right choice. So I think that's what I'm just trying to discern the difference between that fear of this will grow me and challenge me, and this is not right. Instinctually, I know something is not right about this, and I'm not taking that step forward because the heart and the brain are in coherence, and the heart is speaking to the brain saying, no. You know that on that innate level. Yeah.
And the sense that I get is that more and more you grow that gut intuition, that knower feeling, and especially as you're removing more and more fear, maybe you're connecting in with that a little bit more. And I'm trying to think about like what it's looked like in my life, and I think you're right. Like there have been things that I was terrified of, but deep down I was like, but I still kind of want to do it.
Yeah.
And so if I'm understanding you correctly, I think that's what you're talking about when you're talking about that knower. It's like there's fear here, but if the fear wasn't here, I would still want to do this.
Yes.
Where if you're afraid of something and if the fear was gone, you still would be like, I don't think I would want to do it anyway. Right. Then maybe that's actually that kind of intuitive place saying this might not be the right path based on what we know about your desires.
Right.
Have you seen your own desires change? Because I get a lot of people who are coming to me either at a quarter life crisis or a midlife crisis, and they're in flux of having everything that they thought they wanted is now shifting into something else. And I think a lot of people are going through, what some people might term an awakening experience. And in that awakening experience, all of the things that you've accumulated up till that point in your life kind of fall out of meaning, or you have to reorganize how you're thinking about them. How do you approach that in your practice and help people kind of redefine their desires and shift that trajectory?
Oh, that's big. I would say with myself, I started realizing deeper relationships are a lot more important to me than probably anything else, that connection. I work with so many people who have all of the things that you would think would make them happy. The money, the house, the family, and their lives are complete disasters. That it's just a beautiful show for the world, but that is not what is going on inside. So it's that connection for me that feels the best, that if I can, for me, actually, because I never thought that I would have such an impact on people's lives. So to be able to do that, to give somebody, like I like to call myself like the spiritual cheerleader, because I just think we all need that cheerleader that's like, it doesn't matter what it is. If you want to have financial abundance, and if you want to have a abundant relationship with your family, with your spouse, with your community, if you want to have abundance in the vocation that you choose, that it just brings you such life and such joy, then that is the stuff that I love being able to tell people. You absolutely can have that. There's not anything in this, it doesn't make sense to me to be able to look out at these trees and picture this God up above that says, well, this tree gets all of the leaves and this tree doesn't get any of the leaves. And I think we grew up like that. At least I know that I did. I grew up like that, like the people who had it all and those that were happy, those were air quotes, and those who were happy, that really truly were happy, where it wasn't just the show. I mean, I just heard that all the time. Well, they're just so lucky. They're so lucky. And I don't think it has anything to do with luck. I think that's being in alignment with the vibration of what it is. And that, again, is mind, body, spirit. Because you can say, I want to have the best relationship, the deepest relationship with my partner ever. And you're in alignment and vibrating with, it'll never happen for me. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. This is never going to. So it's not going to happen. And then people say, well, all of this stuff isn't even true. So I am completely off course, I think. Now I forgot your question.
Well, I think we were talking about alignment, and when somebody's going through like some sort of a life crisis, and everything in their life feels like it's like the foundation that they thought they had falls out. In my practice, we call this paradigm crashing.
Yeah.
So like if all of a sudden you find out that your partner of 20 years was cheating on you, and you have to get divorced, and you thought that you had that whole part of your life figured out, and now all of a sudden you have to rebuild something that you didn't ever expect to have to do. So we were talking a little bit about how do you help people kind of redefine what the vision of their life should be, and identify what some of those goals should be, and get them to a place where they believe that would be possible. Because when you're wallowing in that place of paradigm crash, and rightfully so, because it can be an incredibly traumatic experience, but how do you work with people to kind of get over the PTSD of that?
Yeah. So I think it takes time, and I guess I tell everybody that. It takes time. You have to allow yourself to be able to grieve whatever that is, to go through whatever that process is, but you don't pitch a tent there. You get to visit it throughout the day, and it's not like you set up a time at 3:00, I'm going to go and visit my pain. If you go through a whole day and there is no pain, that's fantastic, but it's not stopping it. It's not shoving it down. It's not pretending like it didn't happen, but it's also realizing that part of me feels this way. And part of me knows there's something else out there for me. So people will always say, my life is over. My life is ruined. I'll never be the same. It's true. You will never be the same. That's a blessing. You don't ever want to be the same person every single day. You're never evolving.
Right.
So that's fabulous. And no, your life isn't over. This part of it, this relationship, this thing is over. But that just opens up the door to something else. I just believe that you cannot close one door without another bigger, more beautiful, more potential feeling door opening up for you. I believe that's how the cosmos works. It doesn't mean that, we all want to say, yeah, bring on a bunch of crap for me to feel really horrible so I can get to that next really big door.
Yeah.
But I think it helps to know that it happens. Stuff like that does happen, but it doesn't mean you're stuck there. This is an event, and grieve it and take the time to grieve it, knowing there's something bigger over here, and then we keep moving in that direction.
Yeah.
So what is it that you want? You want to grieve this, but you also kind of want to feel a little joy somewhere in your day. Maybe 5 times in the day I want to feel a piece of joy.
Yeah.
Well, then that's what you're looking for. You're looking for those times that I do feel joyful. And write those down so you can remember, oh God, I did feel good. 2 weeks ago, I felt good 15 times in the day. So that's the direction that I use to help.
I like that. And in my practice, we would call that celebrating your wins, like documenting that joyous experience. But then also, just like when somebody goes to the gym and you may not want to go to the gym and go for a run, but you know it's good for you, I like to encourage people to have a go-to thing that they know is going to uplift them, whether that's a song or a video or a photograph of their family or something that they know they can return to and consistently find a moment of upliftment, because just interrupting a downward spiral with one tiny uplifting moment can slow some of the momentum. And one of the important things that I heard you just say was you kind of have to be willing to accept that maybe something different is possible. And, I struggle a lot because I have a tendency to want to help people who don't want to be helped. And so one of my biggest challenges has been letting people have their own experience and only offering help when somebody wants it. But it's really difficult when people have had truly traumatic experiences to get them to see that maybe something different than this complete downward momentum that they're in might be possible. And one of the things that I've landed on is getting people, when you're in that place, and I've certainly been in places where I felt incredibly depressed and like everything had collapsed on me, and my decision space was so small that there were very few decisions that I were perceiving, and none of them were good. And in that space, it's really hard or difficult, I think, to say, well, you know what? I expect that miracles happen, because you almost want to punish yourself for even being in that space. And having that much optimism is too much of a reward for your being. And so I try to encourage people to just say, well, do you know for sure that these are the only choices you have? Or are you confused about it? Because if you're a little bit confused, at least you can say, I don't know. And in saying, I don't know, you're opening up the possibility that maybe something else is out there without having to directly say, I believe in miracles, because that's such a hard leap for people to make. How do you bring people through, kind of up that vibrational or emotional scale?
Yeah. So very similar to how you do it. And I just call it shining the light of truth on it. So when they've hit the rock bottom and there's nothing, like it's never going to get better, and a miracle is not going to happen for me. I just know that's not going to happen for me. So it's all of the words that they use, all of the situations. It's this, it's this, it's this. And it's always shine the light of truth on there. Is there truth in that? Is there truth that I'm lonesome now? I'm so lonesome. Every night I go to bed and I realize I'm going to bed alone, and I have to raise my kids alone, and I don't have enough money to do all of that. There's truth in that. Absolutely. There's 100% truth in that. But is there also truth in, maybe this will cause me to think of another way that I can either go into a different vocation, or I can start getting really creative and start doing something a little bit differently, that things can start shifting and changing for me in a way that I never thought possible for me and my kids. And that was exactly one of the experiences that happened for me. So how else do I get them up that spiral? I think one of the things is just realizing, I like to make sure that people are realizing that the past does not have to carry over into the future. And when we keep doing that, saying, but in the past I did X, Y, and Z, and that's not how it's going to look in my future, that you get to leave that behind and not define yourself from this past, but start having a vision of what it is that you want in the future. And it can be just as simple as, I don't want to cry every night when I go to bed. I just don't want to cry every night when I go to bed. And the first couple of times that you do that, it's like, that's a win. That's a major win, because that's part of the vision. And you start realizing that if I start shifting my mindset, I can literally start growing into those things that I want. Yeah. And the other thing is noticing what you're noticing, right? Because you know how you can get quiet and you can listen to your breath and you can feel your heart and you can even hear your heart. And then it's that observer that's watching you do that. Yeah. So when you have that observer self, you start noticing what you're noticing. It's like, I am freaking out every time I go to the grocery store. I'm angry at my kids. I'm mad at everybody that's in the store. And I'm noticing this now. And I notice it because this taps into the fear button. What if I don't have enough money to pay for everything I need to pay for in my life? And then we go back to shining the light of truth on it. Yeah. You're just going into the grocery store. You have a list of what it is that you need, and do you have enough money to pay for that food? And then it brings you back to that place of grounding, saying, yes, in this moment, because this is the only thing we ever have is this moment. In this moment, I do have enough money to pay for this grocery bill. Then that's where you let it stay. And then that noticer, when you're noticing that, God, I just get tense with this, I can start letting that go. And then it opens up other channels where more resources literally start coming to you, where I mean, it's those out of the blue experiences that you just you can't expect them. And if you expect them, then that's totally no fun anyways. It takes all of the fun out of the mystery of this. Yeah, mysterious surprise is something that is thrilling.
Yeah. And part of the reason that I love this work and kind of doing the emotional and metaphysical work is because you open yourself up to such ridiculously pleasant surprises. Yes. Well, that came out of nowhere. and it's almost like you can get to a place where you're like, I don't know what's next, but I know it's going to be incredible, and it's going to be bigger than even I could dream.
Yes, yes.
And that's an interesting place to get, and people who are down in the dumps hate it.
You know, and it's true. And I have clients that I have clients that are there, but I think we pop up fairly quickly, I think.
Yes.
Just because, and I love it. That's where I like being that spiritual cheerleader. It's like you just don't want to pitch a tent there. You start realizing, God, I feel horrible here. And just if I start thinking this, because everything is a thought. Everything starts with a thought. Like, right, this table, the microphone, everything that we have in this room. First, it was somebody's thought, right? How we're going to design this, how we're going to have these headphones fit, the color of this table. It's the same thing with our life. That if we keep thinking like, God, I'm in this horrible place and it's never going to change and la, la, la. It's like allow part of you to feel that for this moment. But then allow the bigger part of you that knows that it is not going to be like this. And this is where we're going to start building a vision, because it's just a thought. I'm thinking it's never going to change. I'm thinking it's going to stay horrible forever. Or I'm thinking, well, no, maybe something different can happen. Maybe my life can actually get a little bit better. And when you start shifting that thought, that then again starts shifting that DNA, like really your literal DNA starts shifting too. And then you just start magnetizing better stuff coming to you. Yeah.
And I think part of it is finding the proper outlet or expression for some of those base level emotions and energies that you're feeling. And that, you know, for me, one of the practices that's been incredibly valuable is daily journaling and using that to light. I like how you said the light of truth, putting the light of truth on it. Well, I use my journal in that way, where I say, okay, well, let me write down truthfully everything that I'm really frustrated about, and I get it out of my system to the point where there's a really interesting space that you can get to where you're like, I literally can't think of anything else that I'm frustrated about. And then I go back through that list of frustrations and I reframe all of those. And what I've found, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this, is that with intentions have energy, right? So like Absolutely. You're talking about, thoughts have energy. And so if you're writing a frustration down, well, that has energy and that's mapping itself. But what I've found in my own life is that negative intentions or negative emotions are a type of energy that is disintegrative. So they're independent of themselves. It's hard for them to latch on and exponentially grow in energy. So it takes a lot more negative thoughts to manifest something negative than it does for something positive. So when I do that practice or have my clients do that practice, seemingly it's like, ooh, should I really be writing down these frustrating thoughts? But then because they're going back and reframing it, when you're reframing something, one, you've gotten rid of all of the negative resistance. And so you automatically have access to the higher level radio station where better ideas exist. Yes. And then as you're reframing that, you're channeling that higher dimensional energy, and that's integrative energy. So that energy can hold hands with each other and grow in a much larger way. And so it's almost like it's okay to be mad, but you need to vent it and express it in a way that's safe and personal to you so that you're not projecting it. And then there's like this reframing process that happens where now let's use this. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Abraham Hicks, but with the Abraham Hicks work, they're like, good, now you know what you don't want. Let's use that as a way to springboard and figure out what you do want by basically drawing a line down the page and writing the opposite. When you're working with people, tell me about like somebody who's had a transformation or what that aha, you know, sometimes you're working with someone and they have this aha moment, and that's a really exciting place as a coach. I'm sure that you've had many of those moments. Does one stand out to you as, oh, that was an interesting aha moment, and that I would love to have more of that in my practice. Like that's what I want my work to be about. Well,
what comes to mind is one of my clients is trying to generate a larger income. And I'm all for that because, right, money is just a vehicle to help us to be able to go where we want to go and do what we want to do and donate to causes that are really important to us.
Sure.
So, because I have some people that are like, it shouldn't be about money. Money is just energy.
I'm
just
all about
totally.
money.
Oh yeah, awesome. It's just energy. It is just energy.
Yeah.
So, for her, what had happened was she kept saying she had a amount of what it was that she wanted to generate. And almost every single day, she would send me a text message or give me a phone call and go, it's not working. It's not working. It's not working. And I told her the whole writing process, right at this very minute, write down what your thoughts are. And it was like, it is not working. I will never be able to generate this kind of money. I'm making this stuff up. This is a fairy tale. This is a bunch of BS. And there was other words involved in there. And it's like, that's why it's not working, right? So then she got the aha because it was, I'm saying it. But those thoughts are a million times more powerful, and especially the subconscious thinking.
Sure.
So much more powerful. So then she got the aha of, because she journaled all the time, and I also do the same thing. I would have people write down, you cannot keep that anger or pissed offness inside of you.
Yeah.
So write it down. And I like when people write it because it makes both hemispheres of the brain work together. And then it gets to go out to the periphery of the hand, and you're doing it in such a different way. And then I also have them say it, and then they can burn that or write down now the opposite of that is, and this is what I want.
Yeah.
So for her, when she went back and she looked at her journal, that's basically all she was saying is, I would love to have X amount of dollars and be able to live this kind of a lifestyle, but this is never going to happen for me. And she would give all of the reasons why it couldn't happen for her. So then she went back in and started saying, these are all of the reasons that it can work for me. And all of a sudden, clients started contacting her like completely out of the blue, air quotes, because that's just how that energy works.
Yeah. And it's really amazing how it can come out of the blue. Today, I had a really interesting example where I've been experimenting with selling some of our honey online and having a lot of success using Facebook advertising to generate sales. But because we are a cause, like 100% of the proceeds of our honey go to support our bee rescue efforts. So because of that, and because of all of the political stuff that's happening, Facebook flagged us as being a political cause and pulled all of our advertisements because I was not registered as a political advocate with them, which was an incredibly frustrating experience. So I could have very easily just cursed Facebook and said, screw these people, I'm going to go spend my money with Google. And, and that could have been the end of that. But instead, I just kind of vented onto paper and wrote an angry letter that I ended up throwing away to Facebook to get it out of my body. And then I did exactly what you're talking about. I reframed it. I put that light of truth on it. I said, is this actually true? How hard could it be to be approved as a political advocate? Probably not that hard. It's just a process that you have to go through. And then I got into a really good space about this store's still going to work. I can still make the strategy work. I'm really excited about the momentum that we did build, and all I have to do is go through this process, because as I'm doing this, I'm searching online, how do I actually get approved as a political affiliate? So now I'm opening up more belief that this is going to be possible. It's not going to be that big of a hurdle. And as I'm doing that, my phone starts dinging all the time, and I've got my phone to ding every time we get a sale. And we're just getting like 10, 20 sales are coming in. And I'm like, I'm not even running any ads right now. What's happening? And what had happened was that in that time that I had gotten back in alignment with the idea of our e-commerce store, the Austin American-Statesman had posted an article about our organization, and that was driving organic sales to the store. So on this day where I couldn't buy advertisement, the sales were supplemented by this article, and it was a really interesting experience. But it's one of those things where that happens so frequently to me and to my clients, and I'm sure to you and your clients, that's the power of this work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as you were saying this, it just made me think of something else. When that stuff happens, so like when all of a sudden Facebook is saying you can't, we're banning your store, however they say that. when that kind of stuff happens too, a lot of times those things, I mean, I love how you did it, but for people to know too that when those obstacles happen, a lot of times it's a great way just to make us make that right-hand turn.
Yeah.
It's just
the time to pivot.
Absolutely. And it opens up more opportunities that are so much bigger. So when we're wanting something and we hold on to it with such clenched fist, we literally stop the flow of the thing that it is that we want. And it's always, there's a grand knower up here who knows how to do this and knows the best steps for us, even though we're at this physical level thinking, well, I know exactly what is the best for me. Well, we may know what feels the best at this moment, but there's always something even bigger and better around that corner that we may not know about. So, but I think that's awesome. That's fantastic. And yes, that stuff happens all of the time.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, I'm blocked and stuck. This isn't going to happen. It's like, oh no, I'm in alignment. And yeah, people are calling. What do I need to do to coach with you? Or can I get in and have acupuncture, whatever it happens to be? And absolutely with my clients. For sure. Yeah.
And, I think that one of the things that I feel is underutilized is that all of us have access to incredible technology. I mean, the internet is literally at our fingertips all the time. And so one of the things that I always tell people is, look, if you don't want to do the emotional work, there's a logical way that you can do this. Literally go and type your frustration into Google, whatever you're frustrated about. Instead of putting it in your journal, just type it into Google and then say, how did someone solve this? Oh. and you will find all of these incredible case studies of how people overcame your problem, and it immediately opens you up to possibilities that you otherwise would have been closed down to, because now your mind can be like, logically, well, if somebody else did it, it must be possible for me as well. And so I utilize the internet all the time to be like, I don't know what to do about this frustration. How did someone else solve that? And the internet is an incredible tool for immediately finding the solution.
That's awesome. I've never heard of that. I'm going to borrow it.
I think I will allow you to borrow that.
That's fantastic.
So when you're worried, because as an acupuncturist, I'm sure you're trained in all kinds of Eastern wizardry. Tell me a little bit about how, coaching, at least the life coaching that I see, is kind of a Western phenomenon. And then you have this interesting background of Eastern philosophy. What does the marriage of those two look like? And how do you decide which direction, East or West, you're going to lean as you're working with someone?
The best way that the way I've had these marry together, everything in Chinese medicine is based on nature. So there's just not a fight in nature. There's not a struggle. There's not conflict. There is what we call evil chi and righteous chi. So evil chi is not like bad. It just is happening when it shouldn't happen, but it's just called evil chi. So say, and I'm sure you've seen this, where there's a tree and a chain link fence. And that tree is going to keep pushing up and will literally grow into that chain link fence. It becomes part of it. It just doesn't stop. It just keeps on growing. So the way that those two tie together is when people say, well, my self-image is because I grew up hearing this all of my life. I'm not good enough. And, because, some kids have really horrible childhoods and now they're adults and they're still replaying all of that. And I tie that together like, the trees are the same thing. They don't stop. They don't stop to say, God, the tree next to me probably is making fun of me because my bark is falling off and my leaves aren't as big. And that whole side of me, all of those branches are even dead. It just keeps on going because it has that DNA that tells it to grow. And that is inside of every one of us. If you think of a river, especially during the springtime when there's all of the runoff and logs and debris and things end up in the river, the water doesn't just stop and go, well, I don't know what to do because there's a dam in front of me. It just goes around it. It just keeps on moving. And it's the same thing with us that you just, we'll do it a little bit differently where we'll think about, what looks like it's going to be the best vehicle to get around this. What are the steps that I want to take? But it doesn't have to sit there for a year trying to figure out how am I going to get around this obstacle in front of us. So that is the easiest way to tie together the Chinese philosophy and to tie together Western medical or the Western philosophy on how to make these two mingle. And people seem to get that. They seem to get that when you look at nature, I mean, it just keeps doing its thing, and there's nothing that stops. And that's the thing that comes up probably more than anything with my clients, where self-esteem, and they get stuck, and it's like, I don't know if I can be that big. I don't know if I can grow into that image that I really want to grow into. And whenever we start talking about nature and plants and how that happens, they start seeing that it's like, I am no different than nature. I am absolutely part of nature.
Yeah.
So they tend to get it like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it is just like being water. I like that river analogy because it's like, for me, the greatest skill set that I ever acquired was, how do I reorganize information quickly and efficiently? Because reality is just kind of us taking in information through all of our sensory facilities and then processing and organizing that in some way. And so it's really easy to get overloaded by some input that you get, and then trap yourself in that overload. But if you think of yourself like water, like how does this information want to naturally flow? Like, where does it naturally want to pivot to? Like in the river example, when it hits the dam or when it hits a rock, it just kind of moves around it. Or when water moves from a small container into a big one, it just naturally finds the new edges of the bigger paradigm. And for me, that process of reorganizing information is about kind of sinking into that place. You called it where you've got the watcher there. So you're connecting with this kind of higher consciousness source that's watching you as the entity go through your life. And at that bird's eye view, they have access to all of these other potentials and paths and where the road forks that you could potentially take. How do you get to that place of being at the watcher level? Or I've heard it called being on the balcony looking down.
Ooh, I like that too. How do I get to that place? Well, I guess if I go back to how you were just talking about this, when I love how you say that. It was so beautiful. You were calling it organizing information. And it's similar to what I call a perspective. It's just changing your perspective. It's looking at it. So that, a lot of times, that is how I will get to that place. Because we also have 6 faculties, right? 6 mental faculties, with perception being one of them. And your imagination, and knowing that this stuff out here is just a reflection of what is going on in here. So if I can change my perspective of what is happening on this outside, and it's literally just reflecting back to me what it is that I am thinking, or the vibration that I'm in, if I can notice that, where did that even come from? What is that thing? Did something trigger me from, like, oh my God, this whole event made my poor husband gets beaten up all the time with this kind of stuff. It's like, that was a trigger. That's another trigger. But it's good to recognize that, because most of the time we don't even recognize what is triggering us. All of a sudden our vibration has just changed and we don't even know what it is. So it's being able to stop. And again, for me and the way that I do the coaching, if there is a constriction anywhere in my body, there's something, I am out of alignment. So my spirit's immediately saying, you're off somewhere. So if I can just stop and check out, what is it? What was the thing? Oh my God, it was, he said this, and that always reminded me how that makes me feel left out, or I'm not good enough. And so I'm noticing that. And my perspective now has to change to, that's not even what he meant. Or even if that is what he meant, then we need to sit down and have a conversation about that, because that's not going to work in this relationship, or that's not really even what he meant at all. And so I'm seeing it from a completely different place of literally like being able to watch myself react in a way that is not at all in alignment with how I have the vision of myself. I'm not responding anymore. I'm reacting. So the second I feel myself doing any of those knee-jerk reactions, it's always a time just to go, what is going on? And what is my perspective? How am I seeing this that's coming from ego instead of coming from this place of this infinite intelligence that's inside of me and seeing it as, oh, look at how you're responding to this. This is just a reaction to something that happened to you in the past. It really has nothing to do with this present moment. It's a reminder that there's that, whatever that energy is, whatever that event was, whatever that feeling was, I just tapped right back into that, and I've not healed that yet. So now that's part of my path. I need to come back and I need to heal that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost like getting back to the heart math thing. There's an old adage that, when... I don't know exactly how it goes, so I'm going to butcher it, but it's something to the effect of, like, when you feel yourself reacting or getting triggered, you count to 10. In anger management, that's the first thing that they teach you. Learn how to count to 10, because just giving yourself that space helps you find that kind of different perspective or see things from the whole space. But then taking that counting to 10 a little bit further is, as you work with the Heart Math Institute and some of the exercises that they have, which are most of them are breath related. So learning to use your breath to control your coherency, if you can give yourself the gift of recognizing when you're triggered and then allowing yourself to count to 10 and do some of that breath work, which is really just breathe in, breathe out, and doing that 10 times, that puts you back into coherence. And so now you don't have this disjointed heavy metal frequency where you just want to destroy everything around you. Yeah. You're back into classical music and you're flowing with things again. And you're on that higher frequency radio station, which is where solutions are at. And when you have a deeper sense of awareness, so you can tune in to someone and read empathetically, what was their intention there? Oh, they actually had a bad day at work today too, and I can empathize with that. Yeah. And so as we're in relationship with everything, whether that be people, reality, physical things, animals, I'd be curious. I'm curious a lot on this. I keep saying that. How do you go about training yourself to have that stop moment where you can even be aware of something?
I think it's just really knowing yourself, really. So for me, it's just all body work. I know when I don't feel right. And it's taken me years. It's not like just overnight, all of a sudden I know. But if I feel a constriction, it's something is off somewhere. And I know it right now. So then it's just, and I'm not perfect at it by any means. There's many times I will react to something. Usually it's with my husband, and something will happen. And I catch it, and I will come back. So before I flew out here to Austin, I wasn't prepared. I put off packing. I put off everything. So in the morning here, I'm scrambling, trying to get stuff done, and I can feel me ramping up. And he asked me a question, and I just snapped. And I immediately said, I didn't realize how nervous I am about going out to Austin. And this is the fun part of it, is knowing what your body is saying, because again, it's just spirit or your soul speaking to you. There's part of this that is very scary for me, because I'm doing something completely different that I've never done before. So I put off packing. I never put off packing. I'm always, not always, but most of the time, prepared for the things that I'm going to do. So if I just kind of turned my head and didn't even do the work, then I don't have to look at it, and I don't have to have that uneasy feeling, because this is just pushing up against the edges of the reality that I've known, right? This is growth for me. But I put it off. So as I'm feeling myself I'm getting tense. I feel it. And then when I snapped at him, I just immediately apologized, saying, I'm really nervous about this, and that had nothing to do with you. And he knows that. I mean, he's been with me now long enough during this growth that I've been doing and this understanding myself, to know that It really has nothing to do with him. It's just me, and you just happen to be the sounding board at this very moment. So I catch it quickly, but can I share a fun story with how our bodies have such a grand memory?
Yeah, I would love that.
Not even our memory is having the memory, the body having the memory. So this is one of my favorite stories. 3 years ago in October, I used to be very bad on the computer, and I literally would have a temper tantrum when it wouldn't do what I wanted it to do. I mean, like a 2-year-old having a temper tantrum. And the way our house is set up, if you walk through the back door, you can see right into the office. And countless times, my husband's name is Dennis. Mm-hmm. Dennis would walk in, he'd see me on the computer, and he would turn around and walk right back out, and I could see him out of the corner of my eye. So 3 years ago, we're having a great morning. We had been up for 15 minutes. He was cooking eggs. I was making pancakes, and I needed to print something on the computer. Forgot about it. I was like, oh, hang on a second. I need to go on the computer. Went in there. I wasn't gone but 2 minutes. I came back and said, I can't print that. Could you go in there and print it? That calmly. I said it just like that. He went in there. He printed whatever it was. He came back. He was gone maybe 30 seconds. He came back. And he's visibly upset. And I was like, what happened? And sharp, nothing. It's like, well, something happened because we were having a great moment just a little bit ago, and now all of a sudden you're really angry. And he just stopped and said, can I swear on this?
You can say whatever you want. This is the internet.
He said, you have been pissed off all effing day long. And it's like, I have? And I had to stop for a second and think, oh my God, what am I mad about? Because I don't even know what I'm mad about. That's the worst, when you're pissed and you don't even know why you're pissed off. And I stopped and it's like, we've only been up for 15 minutes. I'm not mad about anything. And he's like, yes, you are. Now, before, that would have been a fight. The fight's on because I'm defending myself and not even knowing what I'm defending for. And he would be defending himself. Yes, you are mad, right? Because who wants to be wrong? Yeah. Yes, you are. You are mad. You've been mad all morning long. So I just calmly said, let's just continue making breakfast. But I'm not mad. I've not been mad all morning long. So he continued to be angry. We had breakfast. We went for a walk. And it was about an hour and a half later, he just stopped while we were walking. And he said, oh, my God. You weren't mad this morning at all, were you? I said, no, not at all. And it was completely a body memory because I would have the temper tantrum, yell for him, would you come and fix this blankety thing? He would come in and fix whatever it was. So, of course, when I yelled at him, that would set him off. Yeah. He would do whatever it was. And so this just didn't happen just a couple of times. This was like my life with the computer.
Yeah.
So his body, he consciously didn't even realize that there was no argument, that I wasn't mad at the computer, that I very casually said it. Yeah. So it's that stuff where we don't even realize that we're living a pattern. We're just reliving it and reliving it and reliving it, and we're completely unaware of it. So that was one of the things that really brought it to my mind, that I have to be conscious of what is going on with this body, because he's a good guy. He's a really good guy and doesn't want to have arguments with me or anybody. Yeah. But if you're not paying attention, this body will have a memory to whatever, and the fight is on, or your day is ruined because, right, everybody did everything wrong to me, and the traffic was horrible, and at work he said this, and well, all of the stuff starts happening. So, yeah.
That's interesting. And I've heard that called a samskara, where when a salient event happens, either traumatic or positive, it creates a bubble in your energy system. And then as you revisit something that is similar in nature, so like going to the computer again, that samskara triggers. And so one of the things that we do in my practice, or that I coach, in order to help elicit samskaras out, is one, learning how to effectively let someone storm on you. So being in tune enough to know that somebody needs to express that samskara or that energy blockage. And so just giving them, being powerful enough in your own presence to give them the space to kind of vent a little bit and you can literally see the point where they're just tuckered out. It's like when a little kid throws a temper tantrum, and what they're doing is they're just expressing all of that excess emotional energy to the point where it's out of their body. And then you see the kids go back and play like nothing happened. And adults have forgotten how to have healthy temper tantrums. And so sometimes you just have to let somebody do that. But you can guide them, or at least my own experience has been, you can guide them by, because most of the time people they've been taught not to have a temper tantrum, so they just bottle it up instead. Right. So that's why I always ask when I meet with someone, describe your mood level, because that literally allows them the space to express anything that might get in the way of the conversation. And then, then once they express that, saying, does that remind you of something, or tell me about that, and just lulling them into expressing that samskara so that they're softening it, so that they don't have that body memory anymore, and the energy of life can move through them, which I call being transparent to life. But that's a really interesting example of you and the computer, and how your husband had literally mapped that scenario to his nervous system.
Oh yeah.
And it was creating false memories, or a false awareness of what the actual situation was in that moment.
Absolutely.
Tell me about some of the tools that you use, whether those be physical or psychological tools. One of the things that I'm always interested in doing is exploring different modalities and different tool sets. On the table right now, we have a bunch of crystal skulls, and that's a technology that I use as a tool. Not every tool is going to work for everybody, and so I like to open people up to the possibility of as many tools as possible, so they can figure out what makes sense for them to have in their tool belt right now. So I'd love to hear a little bit about some of your go-to tools personally, but also the ones that you suggest to people in your practice.
So I have to tell you, I don't do anything with crystals. I don't think I have any physical tools at all, except for writing. I don't think I have any physical tools that I use. And your
acupuncture pens.
Well, and those, I have a lot of physical tools in that.
Yes.
So if I did acupuncture, it would be the needles, gua sha, cupping.
What's gua sha?
Gua sha, it's a smaller shaped. It's usually made out of jade, but now you can get it in plastic, and they used bone for a long time too. But it's thin, and it's, I don't know, what's the measurement on that? Probably 3 inches by 4 inches. And you use it to scrape. So you can scrape it on any body part that needs it. So you can do it to bring chi and blood up to the surface. You can do it to release toxins. You can do it. We'll do it often on the neck if somebody is coming down with a cold. We'll scrape on the neck. It's used. They'll call it coining in different cultures, where they usually will just use like a coin, like a quarter or whatever money that they use in their country. But it's used in Asian countries often. That's moxa.
What's
and
moxa
bowls. Moxa it's mugwort. It's a very Do you know what mugwort is? Oh, it doesn't have a pretty American name. A Latin name. So moxa it's a very invasive weed, but we use it to tonify, so you can put it on different body parts. Usually I treat a lot of women that have menstrual disorders, and so we'll use a lot of moxa on the lower abdomen, either to help with menstrual cycles, or to help with pain, help with fertility.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What's tonify?
Awesome. Tonify. Wow, you're calling me on the acupuncture stuff. Tonify.
I don't know anything about it. So.
I guess I'd call it building it up. So you're building something up. So you're building up chi and blood, or you're building up an organ system that is lacking, because every one of the organs, they either will generate the next organ, support the next organ, or they're restraining an organ. So, like, for example, if we use the trees again, I'm looking out this beautiful window of this beautiful scenery, so I keep picking on these trees that are so gorgeous. But in Chinese medicine, the lung is represented by the element of metal, and the metal is, the lung restrains the liver, and the liver is wood. So the metal, like, would cut down a tree. So it's it will hold the liver back, because the liver can get very bossy, like a colonel in the army. Okay. So, like, really, that's how we look at it. And we'll hold it back. So, like, if people have a really bad cough and they're, coughing and their sputum, we might want to tonify the lungs because the liver is overacting on the lungs. So then we would tonify, build up the lungs to get them back to a
So the purpose of acupuncture is to bring all of these different organs into balance.
Yes.
Is that an accurate?
Yes.
And then where do meridians come in? Because aren't you working with meridian lines? And maybe can you speak to what that is?
Yeah, so the meridian lines are channels, are just invisible channels that are on the body. There's 12 that are everywhere. I mean, they start from the head and they go down to the toes, different channels on different sides of the body, on the side of the body, back and the front of the body. And the meridians are just invisible channels, and we use points along those channels to needle depending on what the diagnosis is. So, I mean, you use a differential diagnosis to needle specific points on that channel or meridian to tonify, to reduce.
And so as you're tonifying and reducing, is that an energetic thing, or is it a blood flow thing, or is it a combination of both?
It depends who you talk to.
Okay.
So if I was talking to a Western medical doctor, I would never say that I'm trying to move energy. I would never say that. I would say that we put this needle in because where this needle is placed on the acupuncture channel, it relates to some organ or it relates to another body part. So I put the needle in, and what happens when the needle goes in, it travels up. This is really what's happening to the body. It travels up through the sensory system to the dorsal horn, crosses over, goes up to the midbrain, and then there's a rush of white blood cells. Everything from the immune system comes racing down because we have just punctured the biggest organ system, which is the skin.
I see.
Right? So then the immune system comes racing down, making sure everything is safe. And it realizes this is how intelligent this body is. It realizes this is a single-use sterile needle. So the immune system goes away. But then the body knows. So if I'm needling on the wrist because somebody is having ankle pain on the opposite side, I rarely will needle into the place of pain. I usually will do distal needling for that. So if I'm needling into the wrist to take care of an ankle, when those needles go in, it literally triggers the brain to release antispasmodics, anti-inflammatories, whatever it is that the body needs on that opposite side in that ankle. And it gets better. I mean, when I first started needling distally like that, it was like, how on earth does this work? Because this body is crazy freaking intelligent.
Yeah.
It just knows what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the best piece of technology that we have.
It absolutely is, because it can tell the difference from that tiny little pinprick. The needles are no thicker. There are thicker ones, but what we normally use, they're no thicker than a strand of hair. And the body recognizes that, as opposed to a thorn from a tree, which if you poke yourself with a rose bush, if you poke yourself with a thorn from the rose bush, it's going to get red and inflamed and swell up and pus, and it's going to try to push any kind of toxins out of there immediately.
Right. We working with bees, it's like a bee sting. We see it all the time.
Yeah.
It's almost the same thing. Like the needle of a stinger is almost the exact same size as an acupuncture, but
wow.
Sometimes we call it nature's acupuncture because
because
it does build up collagen. But what you're saying is the body does know the difference between a sterile needle and something that has agitated it, because bee stings tend to swell up, and obviously there's venom involved in it as well. But it's really interesting, as I've developed more of an antibody to bee stings. If I have a sore throat, that'll be the place that I get stung, and then my sore throat will go away. It's like the bees know where on my meridian lines I need to get zapped.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, it reminds me. I have a cat who's 20 years old. She just kind of hangs out on my bed. She gets down, uses the litter box, eats her food, and comes back and just lays on the bed. And there's some nights where I'm thinking a lot and I'm tossing and turning, and I am paying attention to her because she lays so close to me. And before I even move, she moves it. She moves first, and then I will move. But I know that I'm getting ready to reposition myself. And it's like she energetically already knows exactly what it is.
Yeah, she's intuiting.
Yeah. It's like the bees and the cat.
Yeah, that's interesting. So for somebody who maybe doesn't know why they would go to an acupuncturist, like what are some ailments that acupuncture can be really valuable for?
Anything that you would go to your medical doctor for, acupuncture can treat. The only thing, and I believe it's throughout all of the United States, the only thing we cannot treat is if you are actively having a heart attack or a stroke, you cannot come to us as the primary care. If you happen to be with us, we have to call 911. That has to be sent out. Anything, fertility, pain, hair loss, constipation, Crohn's, broken bones, helping them mend back together quicker. We don't fix the broken bone after you've gone to the doctor. Yes, that's the other thing we don't treat. We have to refer that out.
Got it.
Yeah, but anything that you would go to a medical doctor for, minusing those three things, you would go to an acupuncturist. A cold, we prevent colds, which I had a great conversation with an old pharmacist and said you absolutely cannot prevent a cold and you cannot make a cold go away because it is a virus. And it's just like, well, we do, and we look at it differently. And the poor guy, I just begged him, please just take these herbs and just try the next time you have a cold, and he just absolutely refused to do it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
He didn't want to have that experience.
Not at all.
So it sounds like maybe there is preventative acupuncture and then acupuncture that's an actual treatment to a symptom.
Yes.
What would preventative look like? Like how often would you need to be going in?
It depends what's going on. So people who have just compromised immune systems or lower immune systems because of so much stress, people like that, I usually tell them come in a couple of times a month. Just 2 times a month usually is pretty good. Or at the first onset of something, if you feel like you're catching a cold, or if it's something that's been going on with your gastrointestinal and it's been cleared up and now it's like, I just know, or it's that feeling is back, then you come in right away. And sometimes we just have to do a couple more treatments back to back to get things back on track. Because the body knows what to do to get better, and it just gets off a track. And the needles help it to get back on track to do the thing that it needs to do.
Yeah.
So we do preventative, and it's already happening. And last ditch, we get that all the time. I think every practitioner that I have spoken to, we hear this. I have come to you. You are my last ditch hope. This is what I have. Nobody has been able to help me. Can you help me? And not always, but usually we can. It's pretty miraculous.
Yeah. It's interesting how reality kind of puts the pinch on you, and it's almost like you get forced into having this expanded experience. One of the things that set me on the more metaphysical journey that I've been on for the last 15 years was that I had a debilitating back injury. I was a long distance runner my entire life, and so I was running 12 to 20 miles every single day. Wow. And one day after, I think I had run 14 miles the day before, I got out of bed and I tried to stand up and I just collapsed on the floor, and I was in so much pain that I could not pick myself up off the floor, and my brother and roommate at the time had to like drag me into the bathroom. It was a very comical scene. But I went to and got x-rays to a traditional back doctor. I forget what the name of that is, but they took the x-rays, and a disc had somewhat collapsed, and they were basically like, at your age and the way that it's collapsed, we don't really suggest surgery. Physical therapy might help, but here's some pain medication because you're not going to be able to stand up straight for a while. And that was so, because I've always been somebody who was just believed in infinite possibilities before I knew that was a metaphysical concept. I just have always expected that great things are going to happen to me. And I've always people always consider me to be the luckiest person alive. So when this doctor was telling me that I was the anomaly in the other direction, that this was the one type of injury that he wasn't going to be able to heal, I was like, you got to be kidding me. And so that led me into doing the Google search thing that I suggested. How have other people healed lower back running injuries? And I landed on both acupuncture and muscle testing. And I used a combination of those two things to, within a 3-month period, I was running 14 miles a day again. Yeah. but it was just interesting because after having that personal experience, because with all of this woo-woo stuff, it only works when you want it and need it to work. It's almost like if you have an arrogance about it where you want to be able to use it as a party trick, it's not going to work. But when it's relevant and it needs to work, it will work. And you can read as many metaphysical books as you want to read, but ultimately, and if you haven't had your own personal experience with it, you get to a point where you're like, I don't know, maybe that's just magical thinking. And so it was an interesting experience for me to actually go through the healing process and be like, okay, I don't know what's going on here, but I know that it did work for me, and that maybe it works. Maybe I should give credence to some of these other stories and testimonials that I'm hearing of people that it's worked for. And so then I developed this massive curiosity for why did that work? Yeah. And that put me down a rabbit hole that, I'll probably never come out of. Yeah. It seemed like I can certainly understand from your position when you're trying to explain what you do to an allopathic care physician, that it can be difficult, and sometimes you want to shy away from using more woo-woo metaphysical terms. But everybody listening here is way into wizardry, so we don't have to worry about that. I am curious, do you find yourself, because I used to be terrified of using metaphysical words. I always tried to use science to explain what I was talking about. And that's how I got into people like Gregg Braden and people who have really good scientific minds. Like heart math is a really scientifically proven studies about some historically woo-woo concepts. Yeah. Do you need the science for yourself, or is that just the way that you use to communicate with people who may be shut off to more woo-woo concepts?
No, I need it.
Yeah.
I knew when I think I was probably 6 years old, and I remember asking my mom to have a private conversation with me. And so we went. I still remember sitting on the end of her bed, and she had the pink, there's a name for this kind of bedspread, but we were sitting on the end of her bed and this beautiful pink bedspread. And I just said, what is this all about? Like, why are we here? I mean, at 6, and to me, thinking back to it now, that's astonishing to know at 6 years old. Why wasn't I out there playing on the jungle gyms? And I mean, I did all of that stuff, but I knew something was going on. I just didn't know what it was. And I don't know how she explained it to me. I'm sure she used God and the Bible and all of that stuff. And it would make sense if I knew what she said now. But she's now gone, so I can't ask her. But however she answered me, never answered the question. And I grew up with the same kind of God I think that most of us grew up with, that was like the mean Santa Claus. And he would, right? That's how I always think of him. Like, you get it, you don't. You get it, you don't. Right? I mean, and if you do something wrong, you're doomed. Then it's like, then why am I even going to bother to try to ever do it right? None of it ever made any sense to me to begin with. So when I started thinking there's just got to be something more to this. There's just got to be something more to this. And I didn't get to really discover it, or at least I didn't truly believe it then until after the passing of my daughter. That opened up all kinds of doors for me. And then God became a completely different thing in my head, because no longer could he just be this person, because why would you take this kid that's so good? That's so good. And why would you leave these other people that are just assholes and hurt people, and their whole reason of existing is to cause as much pain to another person as possible? So that made no sense. If that's the case, there is no just God, and I didn't want to believe that. So weird things started happening, like pieces of car glass would show up out of the blue. I mean, like, I would park my car, go to school, and I'd come back. Nobody has been in my car, and here's car glass on my seat of my car, or car glass on the floorboard. So this weird stuff starts happening. And it was weird to try to say that to somebody else, because they would always say like, oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's like, that's not interesting. Like, there's something going on here that I don't know what it is. And I got tired of being blown off all the time. So that somehow, I don't know if I found Gregg Braden or if Gregg Braden found me, but he was the first one that could start explaining the science behind this stuff. And it was like, oh my God, now I can rest into something that felt true. Because nothing else really felt true. It was just like, we just go through this life fairly miserable, never really achieving that thing that we want to achieve. Because at least in my life, the way I grew up with money was people who have a lot of money are assholes, and they have the big house on top of the hill, which I want the big house on top of the hill because it's a really great view. And then you get to bring in all of your friends and say, look at this really great view, be part of this. But that's not how I grew up. Those guys up here, they were looking down at the little people like us. So all of my thinking was convoluted and just crazy weird. So when there was this science that would come in saying, this makes sense, and we can back up the things that you're thinking and the things that you're seeing and these events that are happening to you, we can back all of that stuff up, that I got really interested and really wanted to know what it is. For some of my clients, they need to know the same thing. Others, they're just like, just tell me and I'm going. I don't, my world is not black and white. All I need to know is you just tell me what to do and I will take those steps and it will show itself to me. But I need the science.
For somebody who maybe isn't familiar with Gregg Braden, you might be more familiar with his work than me. Can you give an overview of kind of the type of science that he's laying out? What was it that first attracted you to his message?
So he's a geologist by trade. But he went back to to a lot of indigenous countries and studied in Peru and Tibet, and I can't name off all of the places he's been, many. But he studied their religious traditions, and from the religious traditions started realizing that they're saying everything that quantum physics is qualifying now, and that was the piece that he put together, that it is this. That there is a God, but it's not this mean Santa Claus God, that it's this consciousness. That, right, and even still when I say consciousness, I still have a hard time kind of wrapping my head around that, because it's something you can't, it's harder to identify with, where we can identify with the person. But that's kind of falling away from me to be able to identify just with the person, because it has to be more than that. So he took the spiritual part of it, all of the old indigenous teachings, and was able to bridge that gap with the science and say, now this is what the science is saying, which is exactly what indigenous people said thousands of years ago, 5,000 years ago. They already said this. They already had drawings of this. And some of this even goes back so far, and I'm not familiar with the tribe or the people who had this, where there's actual drawings that look like UFOs, which was like, wow, I just discovered that. I think it was in June when we were in Vancouver. It's like, what? I didn't know anything about that. So all of these new discoveries are starting to come out too. So it was just the way that it was the spiritual part, and then he can just tie it together with everything that is happening in the quantum physics world that says exactly what the spiritual traditions had always said. But now we have that proof.
Yeah, he's definitely an interesting guy for anyone listening who wants a primer on what we're talking about. I think The Isaiah Effect is the book that Gregg Braden wrote about going and living with all of these different tribes, and kind of the metaphorical significance that he found in what they were talking about, using the language that they had of their time to explain these very high science ideas that we're starting to uncover in quantum physics. And there really is an interesting thing that's happening on the fringes of science right now, where quantum physics reads like mysticism, and you're seeing this kind of marriage of those concepts. And I think in some camps that can be a dangerous thing, because they're using concepts in a way that they shouldn't be used, because they're trying too hard to legitimize their woo-woo ideas. But in other senses, there are real crossovers to what we're seeing in science, and kind of the framework of reality. for me, someone that I'm very interested in right now that I've talked about on the podcast before is a physicist named Tom Campbell. And Tom Campbell has a book called My Big Toe. It's his big theory of everything and a theory of consciousness and how kind of consciousness what you're talking about, like we've historically anthropomorphized God. We think it's this person with a beard in the sky that is Santa Claus. I like that. And Tom Campbell does a really good job of speaking about how all of these woo-woo things could be possible within a framework of very logical science and experiments that you can do for yourself to kind of start having an experience with this larger consciousness system. So rather than calling it God, he's calling it a larger consciousness system, because that's maybe a better way to think about it, because it's not necessarily a man that's making choices on you. It's a system that you're interacting with. Yeah. And for a scientist or somebody who's skeptical, that's a much easier concept to work with than some guy that's making choices for you. Anyhow, I highly suggest Tom Campbell's work to anybody who's listening, but also Gregg Braden. Now, I know you've been to a few different Gregg Braden conferences. What are the type of people who show up to that? Like, and my understanding from when I first started going to conferences like that 15 years ago to now is that there's a pretty mainstream audience that's showing up. Is that the case?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's people in there that are doctors, that are lawyers, that are your just normal everyday people. And then you get some that are out there a little bit that it's like, okay, I met a couple of people that are from a planet, and I'm not for sure what the planet was called. I'm just not that evolved yet.
The Octarian showed up.
I'm not sure who it was, but yeah, I think there's a lot of people just that they're just tired of the same old, that there's got to be more than this. And when you can use the science part of it to really be able to prove it, I think that's when you get more people on board, that it's no longer woo-woo, that now we can say there's a reason that this stuff is happening. So yeah, because there was a lot of doctors and people that I would not expect to be there, and lawyers and real estate agents, and I mean just normal run-of-the-mill kind of people, and just people who want to know more and start doing more with their life that is fulfilling. And because this thing about working to accumulate and then to die just doesn't seem to light up a whole lot of people anymore. That there's just got to be more than that. And what is it, and how do I tap into it? That seems to be the people that are showing up.
That's cool. And I like how a lot of the spirit science, for lack of a better phrase, that's coming out is focused on, personal power and how your personal power can contribute to a group and mechanisms for thinking about that. Because as we know from science historically, like actual legitimate, what we would call legitimate mainstream science always gets proven wrong, and the innovations always come from the outside fringes, and the minds that come up with the new innovations are always laughed out of the building at first, and then slowly those fringe ideas move more towards the center until they're adopted. And I really think that we are seeing a paradigm shift in how we approach modern medicine, mainstream science, and really the framework of reality. And because I coach with a lot of entrepreneurs that don't necessarily have a metaphysical bent, and I'm like, if you want to be known as an innovative entrepreneur and you want to be able to invent something that's truly revolutionary, you need to be going to these meetings, because this is where all of the innovation and the guidance for shifting your thinking outside of the norm so that you can access those higher level, more innovative ideas exists at. And so whether we're talking about technology that we actually utilize at a physical level to heal ourselves. So some people see crystals the way, like I view crystals the way I view my iPhone. It's a mechanism that alters the way that the radio waves of my body interact with reality, and that opens me up to new levels of experience and awareness. not everybody's going to go for that, and that's fine. But there are so many different new modalities that are popping up that allow you to access where you're at, that next layer of thought that might not have been available. And if you're somebody who's seeking personal growth, who's looking to be an innovator, or all of the entrepreneurs that are out there that are listening, who I'm working with, or who maybe want to get into a more woo-woo practice but are afraid of what your peers are going to say, you can frame this as, look, I'm an explorer and I'm interested in innovating at whatever level is given to me, and I don't necessarily know where ideas come from, but if there's a way for me to enhance how I'm accessing those ideas, then I want to find it so that I can open that door for other people. And so I think that there is value in all of the science that's coming up, and it is opening this type of material up to somebody who even 5 years ago wouldn't have been open to it. Yeah. Who are some other people like Gregg Braden that you're into?
Oh, God, I love Joe Dispenza. But he also a doctor of chiropractic, but now he does a lot of, are you familiar with him?
Yeah.
Yep, so now he does a lot of the, the neuroscience. Bruce Lipton, Lynn McTaggart. And those are probably the people I follow the most. There's another guy, because I can't remember his name. He calls himself the medical medium. And he realized he was a medium when he was like 6 years old. And I can't remember his name. I want to say it's Michael Anthony, but I just don't think that that's correct. But science, and he also is in the science world. But those are the people that I usually follow, because I started getting so broad and so out there that I couldn't rein myself in, so I just needed to come back to my happy three guys, and usually those are the three that I always go to.
Yeah.
Greg, Joe, and Bruce, and I call them by name like that because, we hang
like
out
the three
on
wise
the weekend.
men.
Yeah, they actually, I love it. They call themselves the Three Amigos.
Oh, nice. They do have a playful spirit.
They do, and they are as friendly and down to earth as they are intelligent and know their business. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think I can relate with them because they will just have a normal conversation with you like this, where some other scientists are so, they know their stuff so well, but they can't have a conversation like this and show you how to employ this into your own life. How can you see this magic happening for you? And you know that magic is only magic when we don't know the technology of it. Right. And once you know the technology, it's no longer magic, it's a tool. And then you just start using it.
Absolutely. Now, a lot of these people are traveling with people who claim to be channeling an entity. I won't pigeonhole you into having to be in that camp of somebody who is really into channeled work, but I am. Yeah. I've read like every channeled book that has ever been put out on the marketplace. And so it's really interesting to see that perspective. How do you approach channeled work, and what is that for you?
I don't know a lot about channeling, but what I do know are there are times that I will be talking to somebody and they will say, oh my God, that's so profound. Can you repeat it? And you're like, I have no idea what I just said. Mm. And I think all of us have that. Yeah. I think we are all vehicles for channeling all of the time. I just haven't taken the time to pursue it. Yeah. To know more about it, to study people that are channels. I've been around with some people that do channel. I have a girlfriend who channels. And I don't know. Yeah, I think that was I probably was introduced to that 20 years ago, and I think it kind of freaked me out. Yeah. I think I was a little like, ooh, yeah, that's not meat and potatoes, and so I don't want to go down that path. Yeah. So all of this has just opened up a lot more doors, and I think right now I am just so focused on doing what I'm doing that I'm not my boundaries aren't wide enough yet. Sure. Well, but I can tell you this is kind of interesting about channeling. Mm-hmm. So there was a thing that had happened with a company that I worked with, and it got to the point where I was going to have to take them to court because they owed me some money and they weren't going to give the money back. Mm. So it was going to get ugly, and the money that I wanted back from them the lawyer fees and court costs would have cost a lot more money than the money that I wanted back from them.
Yeah.
So I was having so I conceded with a banker and financial advisor to just go ahead and allow these people to do it how they were going to do it. And I said, okay, that's fine. And I didn't agree with it. So it was a Saturday after we made the decision to go with it. And I'm thinking, I can't do this, because every time I have a transaction, I just don't want to say what this is. I'm deliberately staying vague about this.
Sure.
But every time I have a transaction, my energy is going to be in a low vibration and back at this place. And I can't do that for the next 3 years. And all I said was, how am I going to do this? And I swear to God, I heard Gregg Braden's voice say, you know how to work the energy. Work the energy. And that's all I heard. And it was just like, and I mean, I honest to God turned around and I looked, because it was Gregg Braden's voice.
Yeah.
And it's not that I have a hot crush on him, but I kind of do.
We all do.
He's just so good. Well, all three of the guys.
Yeah.
So anyways, I thought, okay, I know how to work the energy. What do I want? And so I said what I wanted, and I said it out loud. And God's honest truth, within 2 weeks, a woman called me up and said, well, I see that whole issue has been taken care of. And it's like, oh, it has. And she said, yes, I was talking to so-and-so, and this whole account is closed and it's done. And that's exactly what I was saying, was that this thing is null and void, and that it goes back to the nothingness from which it came from. And within 2 weeks that happened. And so it was just like, whoa. And I have not had that experience since, but it was so real. Actually, when we were at the Science and Spirituality Conference, I said Vancouver, it was Nanaimo in British Columbia. Joe Dispenza was doing a meditation, and Lee Carroll had said he channels every time he does a meditation. He just doesn't realize that he's channeling. Yeah. And it was cool because his voice changes in such a way that it's just not the same person, you know? I mean, it's just, it's very different. So, yeah.
Well, and it's like, where do my best ideas come from? And so, I think some people use either a metaphor or in actuality they're connecting with another entity, and other people are just framing it as I'm channeling or bringing through my highest potential or my highest creativity. And when you talk to any artist, they'll be able to tell you that there is a space that you get to where you're kind of in this timeless zone. And it's like this river of ideas that you have access to that aren't available to you in your day to day. But if you can find the right time, place, setting, frequency, coherence, it's like you can tap into that higher, more infinite access to information. And that idea, I think, you hear in the metaphysical community people misquote Einstein all the time, and so I'll do it right now just to continue that trend. But he said something to the effect of, you can't find a solution at the level of the problem. You have to approach it from a wider perspective. And for me, one of the valuable things about considering this idea that maybe there are ideas that live outside of me that I can tap into is that it makes problems that I can't solve a little bit easier inside of me, because I know, okay, well, maybe I can get to a place of coherence. I can get to a place of ease, reduce some of this resistance, and maybe I can tap in to the solution. Maybe faith is just a knowing that somewhere in the ether, in this information cloud that we call reality, the solution exists, and all I have to do is fine-tune my radio in a way that will tap into that. And I think that can be an interesting way to think. It's why the concept of God is an interesting concept, because it gives you access to possibility that you otherwise don't know how to access.
Absolutely.
And for me, that's how I think about intuition or consciousness, or reality itself. It's this system that's constantly giving me feedback, but the feedback is showing me how I can tune myself to tap into something greater.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I had a great thought and it's gone. But I had a great thought with that. Absolutely. There's, it's not going to come to me. Yes, but I'm in total agreement. Absolutely.
So when someone has a frustration or has a problem or has something that they want to shift in their life, what is the first step for them to take if they want to work with you in some way? Like, I think a lot of times people are uncertain about what doing this type of work will look like, and so there's a fear in that uncertainty, and so then they don't even take the next step because they're so terrified that it's going to be, you know, something really weird and strange and over their head or outside of something they want to experience. So maybe we can root that in reality a little bit and talk about, like, as somebody works with you, what does that process actually look like in physical practice, so that somebody who maybe has some uncertainty can shore that up a bit?
Yeah. So the first thing is understanding whatever the problem is, because that's it. That's why you're seeking a coach, right? Because I have some kind of problem. I don't want this in my life. I don't know how to get around it. I don't know how to fix this. So it's understanding that everything in your past brought you up to this point. This is the problem. And it's literally starting to get a vision for the future. What is it that you want in your life? And sometimes we have to start by just writing down, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this. Because we live our life saying that, I don't want, I don't want, I don't want. And we kind of forget what we do want. So we figure out what is it that you do want in your life, whether it's a physical thing or a relationship, which I guess is a physical thing, or a change in your vocation or something going on with your health, or a way that you just want to feel, or building that your self-esteem and just feeling the confidence to be able to go out and have dinner by yourself and go to a movie by yourself. I mean, there's some people that don't have confidence just to show up as themselves. They need to be with somebody else. And that is just a distractor, that they don't have to pay attention to them. I'm with this other person. And so it's absolutely having a vision of what it is, or the feeling that you want. And it always starts off with if we use the skulls here as something small, this little skull, and then it always is like, oh, but you know what? I think I really want this thing, which is bigger, but because we don't even realize that we want something bigger, because most of us have been told we can't have that, or we've talked ourselves out of that. So we stay in this really small kind of wanting, but or desiring, and desire comes, I believe it's Latin, that comes from of the Father, right? So it's just like, we can't even want it if it cannot happen in this universe. I mean, the mind that thought it up, we can't even think it up unless it exists in the mind that already thought it up, which is the consciousness, right?
Yeah. So I want to pause and just reinforce that, because I think that's a really powerful concept, is that if you can desire it, you can have it, is basically what you're saying. Because it wouldn't be possible for you to have the desire if it weren't possible to achieve the actualization of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. 100%.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's total. And when people start realizing that, and then these other things start coming up going, well, you know, I've always wanted to, and whatever that thing happens to be. And it's like, well, I think I'm going to pursue that. And it's almost like that kid, like really coming up at Christmas time, I think I really want to have those go-go boots. And it's like, yeah, you can have the go-go boots. And then you start moving towards that. And then things start showing up if that person is in alignment with it. I mean, this isn't like, you don't get to just snap your fingers and
it's not a genie in the lamp.
It's not the genie in the lamp, but close. If you're staying in alignment with it,
yeah,
it definitely is. But that's how it is. And then people start living these really full lives, and things happen where they say, well, I can't leave this job. I really want to do this, but I can't leave this job. And it's like, well, then don't leave that job. This job is just serving you as you are going to this place, to this other vocation or this other thing that you want to do. And then the weirdest things happen where all of a sudden, oh, I don't know, maybe you're going to get laid off, and while you're getting laid off, you get some kind of a severance pay. And it's like, well, holy cow, if I'm getting severance pay, I'm getting paid for showing up for this work that's not even there. So I can now go and start experiencing this thing that I really do want to do.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, more doors start opening up.
And I know a lot of people who have experienced that exact scenario. It's interesting how that's like this metaphysical loophole where when you start doing this work, it's like, here comes the severance pay.
Yes.
Not saying that everybody should just try to get fired from their job, because I think there is some vibrational work that you can do if you hate your job or you hate the people there. What they're mirroring to you, at least in my belief, is something in you that can be healed. And so you might as well use that experience to heal that, so you don't have to attract those people in different forms at the next job.
Absolutely.
Anyhow, continue.
Yeah. No. I mean, I that's where we continue. I forgot where I left off, but I think that's where I started, is always having a vision for the place that you want to go, because it's always a thought.
Yeah.
It's always a thought. And if you find yourself, if you get caught up in, because I caught myself doing it over and over, this is too big of a dream for me. That I don't think that I can do this. And then I would have to use those tools, like write down every reason why can't you do it? Why aren't you good enough to do it? And then I would have to write down all of the reasons that I thought that I could do it, because it's really growing into your greatness and the potential of what we have, because none of us know what our potential is. We're going to die with potential still in us. We can only accomplish so much in the short time that we're here. But being able to live into every single bit of our potential.
Yeah.
It's an upward spiral universe we live in that pull to just keep becoming more, become more.
Yeah.
And expand as much as you can expand while you're here. Just each step of the way. Once I reach this, I've not met anybody who has reached that goal or vision that they wanted and said, okay, that's good enough, I'm done.
Right.
It's just like, oh, now I want, how do I get to here?
Yeah.
And then we move up.
Because the ultimate desire is expansion. And so you always want to be growing beyond your current circumstances. And,
absolutely.
You know, I think that for people who, again, it comes down to, you have to believe it's possible. And as you get into this kind of thoughts create reality realm, that can be a concept and idea that's easy to turn your nose up to, or roll your eyes. But it's one of those things where if you approach it like a scientist, and that's what so many of these teachers that we're talking about, Gregg, Braden, and et cetera, talk about, is if you can just approach it the way a scientist would, where you're not bringing your bias to the experiment. Mm-hmm. You're saying, well, let me run an experiment and see if at a small level this has some tangible effect, and I'll let the data show me whether or not this is something that I should continue with. And you can start at a very small level. You know, likely if you're in a place where you hate your job and you hate your partner and you hate your family, that's not all going to change right away. But you can change little things, like, wouldn't it be nice if I had 15 minutes a day where I could just feel peaceful? And so starting with what I always try to encourage people to do is, let's dream those big dreams as big as we can get them. Let's take whatever the biggest dream you think you can, and then let's say, what would be 10x that? What would be 10 times that dream? Mm-hmm. So that we can just practice stretching the desire muscle. Yeah. But then at the same time, let's reverse engineer that into smaller steps that we know that we can actually see some traction on, because that momentum is part of the experiment that will lull you into the bigger manifestations. And so, you know, I'm into a guy named Steve Pavlina, and several years ago, he had an experiment where he was talking about, okay, well, let's play a game and let's do an experiment to see if reality really is subjective, or if there's a subjective nature to reality. And let's collectively, you know, whoever wants to join this group, I think it ended up being about 1,200 people, let's collectively intend that we're going to find dimes on the ground in an anomalous way. And it was so crazy to be a part of that group, and we're just finding dimes everywhere. Dimes are falling from the sky. And so that was an interesting experience where it's like, well, Were those dimes are always there and I just didn't see them? And now because I've tuned my brain to look for dimes, I'm seeing them. Or is reality this weird kind of virtual place where when enough attention goes on something, it shows up in the frequency plane? Yeah. And I think that that's what I'm still experimenting with, but you can't be a part of that cool exploration if you don't at least approach it the way a scientist would, without bias. You remove the cognitive dissonance and you just say, let me try this at a small level and see if it works.
Right, absolutely. And the thing that you said too about the people that foo-foo all of this, saying, you know, thoughts causing reality, come on, that doesn't really happen. That's how your life is happening every day. Mm-hmm. It's you're causing your own reality with the thoughts that you have. I can't get a better job. I'm stuck in this horrible relationship. I'm never going to be able to move out of this neighborhood. You're causing that.
Yeah, and at that psychological level, that is the entry point into people having a more subjective experience of reality. Because even if your thoughts have no tangible experience on the physical things, like even if I can't think about something long enough and it just magically shows up, I think that that's possible because I've seen it in my own life. Yeah. But let's assume it's not possible because that might be beyond the framework of somebody's belief. We know through good psychological science that when you learn to structure your thoughts properly, you will expand or contract your decision space. And when you have more space and more decisions available to you, that means that more opportunities are open to you. If the road only forks into two paths, you're very limited. That's a binary decision. But if you open your decision space where now the road is forking into 400 paths, there's a lot more opportunity that becomes available to you. And that can be the entry point into dealing with or having a tangible experience of some of these ideas around framing your thoughts properly, positive thinking, affirmations. Like all of those will likely have their first impact at the psychological level and then bleed into reality from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And even feeling better.
Sure.
Just feeling better from having positive thoughts. And that was one of the, I don't remember, the HeartMath did one of the studies, how it affects your DNA when you're thinking about rage, anger, hate. It literally will shrink your DNA. It constricts upon itself. I mean, it's a whole study that's done, and that's a scientific study.
Yeah.
And then when you think love, compassion, understanding, the DNA will start to stretch itself back out again, and it increases the immune system. It keeps the telomeres at the end of the of your chromosomes, which is for anti-aging. There's a whole myriad of things that happen that are good for the body when you're in a positive thought.
Yeah.
So people who even say that, well, it's just positive thinking. It's like you're healing your body by being in a positive thought. It's huge.
Yeah.
Our thoughts are everything.
And Bruce Lipton has a really interesting 1-hour lecture about what your body's doing when it's in fear versus when it's in love. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes of this podcast. I'll link to all the three of those, the wise men, the three amigos that you like. And then for people who want to connect with you, maybe do some work with you or learn about some of the things, what I like about meeting people like you is you can be a good pointer to information. And so that's why I love to meet people who are on a journey, because then they can open up my journey and everybody that's listening can have their journey opened up. So how can people best connect with you online?
If you go to Nada at nadahogan.com, that is absolutely the best way for email. And then my website is just nadahogan.com.
Awesome.
A lot of thought put into that.
Hey, whatever works. Personal branding is where it's all about. I really enjoyed the ideas and concepts that you brought to the podcast. And, I think that you have it's important to have a guide. Like, we should all have a coach. Even I have several coaches and mentors, and everybody is going to need a coach that's at a certain level to help them guide them up to the next ridge of the mountain. And so when I talk to people, I always say, I may not be the coach for you, but somebody is. You should find somebody who can help you up to the next level that you want to get with. And for anybody who resonated with myself or Nada, I'd love to encourage you to just reach out, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to spend money right away. You know, an email is free, and you can continue the conversation, decide if it makes sense, decide what framework would be best to kind of tackle whatever issue you're having. And then it's just fun to connect with new people.
Yeah.
So I'll put Nada's information in the show notes. It's nadahogan.com. I'm Jon Ray. You can find me at whoisjonray.com. And thanks so much for listening. And Nada, thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I've loved this. You're fabulous.
And Aunt Linda, Uncle Harold, I love you. And thanks for making this happen.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.